when we first started, we started playing with seeds. And when we started, it was really hard to find a place where they can say you're cutting or seeds with the name on it.
So it's
They
just
usually
red
say
variety.
red,
Okay.
red, yeah.
Red or white.
Yeah, so I got a friend who used to work on a farm down here. And I got some orejonas and some American Beauty, so we start playing with the seeds.
Okay.
And then the plant started growing, and we never put attention to it. And then I started going to the seminars, and I didn't see that fruit in there, so I'm like, probably they don't have it. So on one seminar, I bring one fruit, and I asked Ramiro and Edgar Valdivia if they know what they were. And they said, oh no, there's probably some white. And I said, no, it's not white, it's red. And he's like, no, that looks like white. I said, you can cut it if you want it. So they cut it, and that's when they started naming after my last name.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's a huge fruit, right?
Yeah.
And how does that one go commercially? Is the skin, like a lot of it is if the skin is too thin, how does that do like in the market?
I think Robles it's a really good fruit actually, and from production standpoint, so it's a thicker skin, it's a hard skin. If there was a negative, because the bracts get a little hard, they can break off a little bit, but it's just a beautiful fruit. It is so consistent. 3/4 pound easily is our average on the fruit.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you just have this beautiful pink. It's like a pink red fruit. I mean, you can see them when they are ripe. They're like little, Christmas ornaments on the tree,
Okay.
because they're
like
just
the
this
little
bright
Christmas
pink
balls.
thing. And I'm like, oh, we got Robles already, And so we just we're in a little bit of a Robles pick right now, or just finishing. And we had fruit that was easily 1.5 pounds, just huge, just these huge. And we haven't had too much. They can crack when they get that big. Okay. So a little bit of the nose cone. So we talked about protecting that nose cone.
Yeah, because that's where they usually crack first, is right there. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's a theory the Vietnamese people love buying in the cracked fruit because they think it's sweeter. So yeah,
so I think it's more water, and the amount of water the plant gets.
Yeah,
that's what I think why it cracks.
Yeah, I still think nose cone, because if you look at the nose cone, it's a really hard surface, and you just think of all of the elements that are happening on your nose cone.
So you think it's more the nose cone than the watering?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a little bit, but there's an expansion. This gets really dry. If you look at it, just start really looking at your nose cones, and you'll be like, oh, okay.
And so since you guys have been cutting the nose cones with that strategy, less cracking.
We've seen less cracking, for sure.
That's awesome.
For sure. So because we have American Beauty, the Robles, that can happen to mostly just those two. Yeah. Those two. And we didn't have as much cracking last year with American Beauty. We started seeing it at the beginning of the year, and that can also be fertilizer. So when you start playing with different things, it's hard to say, is it the temperature, because we're hot, cold, damp, dry, right?
There's just so many variables.
There's so many variables. So you're just trying to.
Not always one cause and effect.
Yeah. So I think if you have maybe a cause, just stay humble and stay open. That may not necessarily be it. So just say, okay, we think it might be it, but it might be something else.
And you guys have been growing for what, 6 years now here?
2013 the plants went into the ground, and then I joined in 2018.
So 8 years. Yeah. And it seems like you've learned so much since I was here in 2019.
Yeah.
It seems like this farm has evolved so much in your knowledge base and the strategies you're doing.
Yeah, I think this year was actually one of the ones where we kind of thought that we knew what we were doing, and then our first pick was really tough. And it just gets disappointing, because we had a huge bloom. I think over 6,000 flowers and we hand pollinate every flower.
Every single one?
Every single one. We count every single one. It's American Beauty was our first bloom. It's American Beauty is self-pollinating, right? Self-fertile, but we still go there. Do
you mix pollen, or do you?
So our biggest lesson of the first bloom was we were pretty confident that we were going to set the bloom, because it's self-fertile.
Yeah, it is, right?
So usually we have Robles red blooms at the same time, but Robles was late for some reason. So didn't matter. Okay. So we're pollinating. We set it. we're like high-fiving, like perfect set. I mean, literally one of our best sets ever. And so we're thinking we have 6,000 units. We typically will take 50% for poundage. You know, stuff happens to fruit sizing, everything. So we go, well, that'll be 3,000 pounds. And at the end of that pick, we had about 12 to 1,400 pounds, which never has happened. And so we were like, what happened? Now we had a ton of small fruit. They tasted delicious, but ton of small fruit. And I just sat on this over and over, and I was like, what did we do wrong? Like, what did we do wrong? And then all of a sudden it hit me. By self-pollinating, you're not bringing something else in. And so...
And the plants have like adapted to that, it seems, right?
Yeah.
But did you take collection of all like 20 American Beauty flowers and do it one thing, or did you just go one flower and pollinate it?
So the way we do, if we have a flower out here, the way we do we have one? Okay, when we go up there, we'll show you. But we take, when the flower is open, so we take a cup, just a plastic little cup, and the makeup brush, and we brush in the pollen, and we pollinate, and we go to the next, and we mix it. So we're just constantly mixing.
So even mixing a bunch of, say, 50 American Beauty plants, you still got the small fruit, because it's all the same DNA.
Correct.
Okay.
So basically we had, I would say, a third or a little bit more than a third were what we would call our normal 3/4 pound to 1.5 pounds.
Yeah.
And then we just had this abnormal amounts of kind of like 1/2 pound and under fruit. And that
can you sell those?
And yesterday, I didn't show you, and you didn't show the fruit, but the second bloom on the American Beauty, remember, we pollen with the Robles, and there was almost a pound every fruit.
Ah.
So we learned the way we had a field of over here of physical graffiti. And so Tomas had pollinated the physical graffiti, and he starts on the outside. So when he went to the outside, his first pollen he was collecting in his bucket was physical graffiti, and then he was pollinating it. Well, the bloom didn't set. And I was out there looking at how it was the only bloom that we hadn't set all season. And I was like, what? And I was like, oh, hello. He probably had started with 0 pollen in his cup, because sometimes we carry pollen over, but he probably had 0 pollen in his cup. But he did what he was supposed to do. He collected the pollen and he pollinated. The problem was he was collecting PG pollen for PG pollinating. And it wasn't until he got through where there were other varieties. It was that thought process that made me go back to the American Beauty. And I said, oh my gosh, we have been so confident that American Beauty, because it's self-fertile, can pollinate itself, which it did. We said it.
Just small fruit.
It just was small fruit. And
so you guys learned a lot. That was all this year.
Yeah, that was all this. And so it's that humility where you think like, you know what you're doing and you're doing good. And we were high-fiving that we had such a good fruit set, but then when we went for the pick, it wasn't what we wanted. And the outcome was because we needed to think through the pollen even more. So as good as you can get with pollen and pollination, you can still get a lot better. And when you're on a production of over 5,500 plants pollinating, I would never say to Julio, like, oh, you can only take Robles. But what we did after that was we said, cover all the Robles and get that in the pollen bucket. Just make sure we have it. And when the whites, we have whites here, and we have whites really for pollen. And so we said, get all the pollen from the white. So we covered. So then we had a backup of Robles and white pollen mixed. And then we could mix that with PG and American Beauty and everything.
Do you refrigerate any of it or freeze it?
We did on that, just so we had emergency backup.
I've noticed that that will set smaller fruit too. Like frozen pollen.
Got it.
The best is mixed fresh pollen. If you have 4 or 5 varieties, I'll just mix it up, and I'm getting some decent sized fruit off of small plants.
So that's good to know, because we did that. We have 1 bag in there for emergency, and
and it will last like 6 months in the freezer. I've used 3-week-old pollen from the fridge this year, but the fruit was smaller.
Got it.
So it's something about having that really fresh pollen, and I collect mine at 10:30 at night because I don't like the bees will get it in the morning.
Right.
And I don't want to put on a bag, so I just go out there 10:30 at night, mix it up, leave it on in the kitchen. And first thing in the morning, I'll go pollinate it, or usually I actually just pollinate it at night if it's not too many flowers. Although like some Ocamponas won't open till like midnight. So like El Grullo, if you go out at 10:30, it's closed.
It's closed. Yeah.
And there is another thing that we learned. Before she moved in here, we don't have any flowers open at night. they always open in the morning.
First thing in the morning.
Yeah, and now that she's here and she's around 7, 8 o'clock in the night, she saw that the flowers start opening now.
So it's
And
maybe,
years behind, they don't open that.
that's crazy. I wonder if it's more about the care of the plants, or they're happier. I don't know. Climate.
We had somebody else tell us, another grower, that he felt he got bigger fruit by pollinating at night. We pollinate, our average is 7 in the morning.
Okay.
Like if we have a big bloom, I'm up on Saturday, Sunday.
I don't think it's feasible for you guys to be at the night. I mean, if you got rattlesnakes. And
Yeah,
sure
it's last night I was out doing something and I was like, this is stupid. Why am I? I have a big headlamp, but I was like, this is dumb. And it's just not smart. But so we don't have any problem pollinating in the morning. But but if you say, well, that could get you bigger fruit, I think where our bigger fruit comes from will be just really paying attention to our pollen mix, and we can manage that. We do cover our flowers because we do fight with the bees for the pollen. So we had
I saw some bags out there.
We
bags.
Maybe it was August, around August 20th, we had a 15,000 count bloom, which it's a lot.
Count that? That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a lot to pollinate. And the other problem is, you think, oh, we would have a lot of pollen. The bees came in so heavy that every single flower had at least 20 bees, and the pollen would be gone like that.
Yeah.
And so when you think, oh, you have a ton, and when you start to panic that you have a third of your field not pollinated and you don't have any pollen left, it's not a great feeling. Like I used to panic on I would be like, we have to cover more flowers because I use a lot of pollen.